and welcome to Getting There. My name is Terry Green, and this is the Open Pedagogy Podcast / radio show on Voice Ed Radio. We use this space and time to connect with people working in open and technology-enabled learning in the post-secondary education world mostly. And the idea is to get some airtime for people to share what they're up to. And if someone was to ask me who the ultimate guest to have on this podcast would be, I would answer Audrey Waters, and she's here today. Welcome.
Thank you. That's very, very kind of you to say.
I'm pretty excited to chat with you. So you are a writer at Hack Education.
Yes.
And what else would you share in your general bio?
That's probably where I would point most people to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm a freelance writer, so I've published elsewhere, but really Hack Education is the piece of work I'm most proud of, I would say, until the book comes out, and then I'll point to that.
I should be proud of it. I'd say you're like a full-on folk hero in ed tech circles.
That's great. Sometimes I feel that it's, I never quite realized the pressure that folk heroes must face, but yes, I feel that sometimes.
I bet. So you've done a little bit of research into educational technologies. Have you ever come across anything, to any concerns, or is everything fine?
Oh, it's lovely. I think that, ideally what we want to do is actually just replace all human contact with machines in the education system. I think that that's really what else would we want to do to make the future as streamlined and efficient as possible?
I think that sounds perfect. Beautiful. Obviously we're being sarcastic as possible. What comes to mind as like the grossest thing that ed tech has ever done?
Oh gosh. I mean, I think that would be hard to sort of pick one thing. I mean, you could sort of look at products, mm-hmm. Point to certain products as being particularly awful. I mean, I think in higher ed, the one that comes to mind, I think, is Turnitin, the plagiarism detection service.
Yeah.
And it bothers me greatly that schools pay money to have this product that then sort of assumes out of the box that students are criminals, that students are cheating. Yeah. And then it charges schools money to sort of surveil their work, then takes the students' work and stores it in their database. Yeah. So it's sort of it's just wrong on so many levels. But I would say that, if it's not a product, then some of it is really more ideological. And it is the idea of replacing humans with machines, and the idea that somehow the education, the learning process and the teaching process need to be more engineered, right, and made to run more efficiently, and really standardized and automated.
Yeah. Is there any beautiful ed tech out there?
I mean, I think that I don't know if I would say if there's beautiful ed tech. No, I think that there are teaching and learning practices, mm-hmm. that can be liberatory, but I'm not sure that I would center that on the tech.
Right.
I would center that more on the practices and the relationships and the ways in which agency and curiosity and inquiry and justice are fostered. But I think that they're more often fostered by people than they are by the tools that we use. I mean, sometimes tools can help us move that way, but I'm not sure that I would find a lot of beauty in the tech.
I hear you. Except recently I saw a video from some technology called the Pigeon Simulator, where you could control a pigeon and drop bombs on things and stuff. How do you feel about that?
Oh, the precious pigeons. The book that I've been working on, that I guess I'm still technically working on, mm-hmm. it. The editor has the manuscript right now, so it's not it's sort of out of my hands for a while. But I mean, it is, spends a lot of time looking at B.F. Skinner, and I think that, and of course his work famously on pigeons, right, and before he turned to children to train. And I think that it's really important for people to think about the ways in which behaviorism still dominates a lot of the technologies, and actually a lot of the practices in the classroom too. If you ask teachers or students who are becoming teachers in college, what philosophers or what theories of education they know about, Skinner is often one of the is a name that people are still quite familiar with. And even though I think that people like to say, oh, well, we don't, we've moved beyond that. We don't believe in behaviorism anymore. We have cognitive science. I think that partially because of when he was working, I think that it really has permeated the way in which we think about education technology. It's a thread that's, I think, carried through.
I hear you. Wow. I think it was like your very first post on Hack Education mentioned you hope teachers can have more say in the development of educational technology. Do you think that's happened at all? Has anything changed?
I'm not sure it's changed. In some ways, I think that if it has changed, I often worry it's done in ways a bit like Turnitin, where we've asked both students and teachers to do a lot of work for free for these giant technology companies, right? So, the ways in which all of us are kind of, I use the Bob Dylan song Maggie's Farm, like we're all kind of working on Maggie's Farm. We're all working for free on these platforms that take our labor and don't extract our data and don't offer us any compensation, right? And that you can say, well, I mean, it's great, Gmail's free. Who wants to run their own email server? True. I don't deny that, but we're doing a lot of work for free. And I think that whether realizing it or not, and I think probably more often than not, people don't think about the ways in which we have tasked educators to do a lot of the work for free for education technology companies, just by providing their data, the data for this sort of new algorithmic future that they seem hell-bent on shaping us into.
Yeah, that would take a little while to unpack all that, I think. But you mentioned your book. I'd love to talk about your upcoming book a bit, Teaching Machines. It's not in your hands right now. There's a manuscript finished. I saw a tweet recently. You tweeted about another writer, Casey Parks, that you're looking forward to the book and you think it'll be devastating and beautiful. And I'm guessing Teaching Machines will be too. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's funny. I've had this idea of this book for a very long time, and I actually in the book, I think I talk a little bit about when I realized I wanted to write it, and it was at the height of the MOOC. MOOC frenzy, right? The year of the MOOC, 2012. And I was listening to, many of these new founders of the MOOC companies, Coursera and Udacity, talk about the ways in which they wanted to automate education. Interestingly, the background of Sebastian Thrun, Daphne Koller, and Andrew Ng are all in AI. And so I thought, wow, like where does this come from? This idea of automation. And I traced it farther and farther and farther and farther back, and really became interested with the story that happened. And what the book has actually become is the story of how some of the ideas that we hear a lot about today, personalization being the big one, really have their origins before computers. But in these sort of early education psychologists, similarly, a desire to automate education. It's somewhat counterintuitive. Automate it in order to personalize it.
Right.
And so the book really looks from the late 1920s through the mid 1960s. So it's not a book about computers, but hopefully, I think if you're an adept reader, you'll see that it's almost entirely about with the same stuff that we struggle with today.
So EdTech didn't just show up 10 years ago?
Yeah, Khan Academy. Saul Khan didn't invent it, or Bill Gates didn't invent it, or I suppose now Mark Zuckerberg probably thinks that, again, like the idea of personalization is this brand new thing that the Silicon Valley just sort of stumbled upon. And I actually think that that's that's sort of one of the things that enrages me. Many things enrage me about the current batch of computer entrepreneurs, but their dismissal, their rejection of history, and actually their sort of proud ignorance of history is, I think, really damaging. That they insist that by not having any knowledge of a subject area or expertise, that somehow that makes them more inclined to be able to sort of solve problems. No one's really thought about it before until they came along.
Yeah.
And if you have thought about it before, you're clearly the wrong person.
Another gross event in technology. Can you give us some hints on some of the, like your Hack Education, the domain it's beautiful looking, and I love the art you choose, the pictures you choose, let alone the writing. What kind of artwork is going to be involved with the book?
That's a good question. It's so hard to find really high quality images. I'd like to be able to. There's a picture that I love of a little girl. It's a black and white image, obviously from like the 1950s, of a little girl playing with one of Skinner's teaching machines, and she has this big grin on her face, and I feel like someone must have bribed her with like chocolate to be so thrilled about sitting at this machine and figuring out that the missing letter in C blank T is A for cat. Like, she looks so thrilled. And there's similarly a photo shoot that was done. It was when Skinner was briefly working with IBM to develop his teaching machine. There was a photo shoot done with a little boy posing with the teaching machine in different kinds of both studious and relaxed. And he also looks like he's just having such a good time, but he's focused on his work. And it's funny, you think about the ways in which you often see the same stock imagery in today's sort of sleek ed tech marketing. And it's very similar. I'm like, these students are not having a great time. They're doing they're doing workbooks. Like, nobody has ever shrieked with joy over doing repetitive tasks in a workbook, whether it's digital or mechanical. No.
No, you gotta get the picture when they're finished.
So I'm looking. I want to be able to find some old photos, and I think it's also important to find. I was thinking about this morning, actually, to really be able to describe what these teaching machines looked like,
right?
And so to have photos of those as well. Because sometimes when I tell people about what I'm working on, I'm always curious to hear what they think of when I say teaching machines. If they aren't familiar with the history, what comes to mind. And I told my eye doctor yesterday, and she was like, teaching machines like in the Jetsons? I was like, oh yeah, like a robot teacher. Not exactly, but
So that
kind of cultural that cultural imagination. And I think in the 50s and 60s, what's interesting is that so much of this was in the popular consciousness. Right. There were this idea of, that the schools of the future would be like the Jetsons, and there would be robot teachers, and there would be, push a button and get information delivered directly to you. It was very much the kinds of things that were being, appeared in comic books and stuff.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I am very much looking forward to this book. If not you, who would you choose to record the audiobook version?
I don't know. I don't know that I want to record the audiobook version, just because I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and there's something about getting a thick book, and you're like, oh man, it's 700 pages. Whew. My book isn't going to be 700 pages, by the way, but you're like, oh, this is a lot. And then you get an audiobook, and it might just be like a 200-page book, and you're like, it's going to take me 23 hours to listen to this.
Oh my God.
Oh God, no, I don't, it's for some reason, the time on the audiobook feels like a really big commitment. Oh, so who would I want to read it? Man, that's a good question. I haven't thought about this. I need to get my agent on this. Um, that's a good one. I don't know.
Oh, that's okay. Um, okay, so speaking of, earlier you mentioned we were doing a lot of labor for free. Some of the past work you've done, you're not doing it for free, but I think you're underpaid by a long margin for doing, especially your year-end reviews. I saw you mentioned somewhere that one of them was like about 500 hours of work.
It seems like, I mean, it is an immense amount of work, and I had to actually greatly cut back on it last year. So the end of
Right.
2018, there was just no way for me to do the research for the book and the kind of intensive work. And really, it's work all year long.
Right.
I pay, or, up until taking this break to work on the book, I would pay very close attention to as much of the news as I could about education and technology, because I feel like the it's really interesting to me to pay close attention, and then you can kind of see the way in which certain stories, certain messages get really massaged by ed tech marketing, and some of that marketing comes in the shape of journalism, particularly if it's trade publications that are interested in a certain message, and certainly interested in just tech.
Yeah.
Yay, tech.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating for me to sort of see the way in which people want things to be trends, right? They're very hopeful and they keep trying. People in tech are going to keep trying to shove VR down our throats. I don't know how many times people have to say, you know what, we look stupid when we wear a helmet. It makes us feel nauseous. It's really not a cool experience.
Yeah.
And that, then they come back a few years later and they're like, no way, the tech is way better. And you're like, I don't get why this is, the thing. But you sort of see the way in which these stories get shaped in the media, that all of a sudden, everyone in the trade publications are sort of chatting about these things. And if you look closely, it's not at all what's happening in
Right.
schools, right? They cherry pick a few exemplars that are perhaps, using a particular tool and make it sound as though this is kind of ubiquitous, and that this is sort of that everybody's using VR. I'm
No.
like, no, actually, nobody. Facebook can't give them away. Nobody's using VR. Give me a break.
I use it for like 10 seconds to say cool, and then I don't want to do it anymore.
I have done a couple of demos people were trying to convince me that this was sort of the new way to immersive, interactive, and I did one that took you inside a red blood, or I guess it was inside cells,
Yeah.
and you could sort of see the mitochondria. And I was like, I don't I don't know why seeing a mitochondria with a big helmet on my head was somehow more impactful than looking at a drawing of a mitochondria in a
The
book.
real one.
I'm just not convinced that it's really like the virtual mitochondria was somehow a better understanding. I mean, I can't even remember I remember that there were mitochondria. I'm not sure what they do, right? It didn't stick.
It didn't make you feel one with the mitochondria at all.
No, I have no idea what the function is.
Um, but in general, I was asking about how
Oh yeah,
much.
sorry.
So,
I'm a
no
tangent
worries. But
person.
I wanted to ask, basically, like, in a perfect world, if you could, not perfect world, weird world, if you could clone yourself and have as many Audreys as possible working on these, how many would it take to do it reasonably?
I think it would. So I think I would assign different Audreys to do different tasks. Like, it would be great to have an Audrey who would pay attention to the stuff day in and day out, because that's freaking exhausting,
Yeah.
right? And depressing. And then, one that I could task with learning a little bit more about venture capitalism, which still I find to be, I think it's a con game, but apparently a lot of money is circulated, and so I need someone to pay attention to the venture capital, and then it would be I would like to be the person who does the research.
Okay.
Still, I would save that task for this. Audrey would like to go to archives, but I would say, and then probably a couple of others. So I would think like four or five. But that's a lot of Audreys. That's really intense.
So
my husband would be like, no.
So you have 4 more Audreys, but you have to train them. What's Audrey boot camp? What's that like?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's I guess a lot of reading. I would assign a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would live in this world. And congratulations, by the way, on getting hitched. That's amazing.
It was very spur of the moment, but it was pretty perfect.
That's great.
We drove through. For those that don't know, Ken and I have been together for a long time, but he just got a job, and in the U.S., right, the big deal with getting a job means that you get health insurance, and so we were like, oh my God, let's get married, and so we drove to Vegas and went through a drive-through chapel. It was great. The preacher leaned out the window. He asked, how long have you been together? And we said 10 years. And I don't think that that's actually the answer, strangely enough, for a lot of people that go through the drive-through
10 minutes
in Vegas. So he seemed very positive about our,
well, that's great.
about our relationship.
That's fabulous. In just getting ready for this, I've been listening to a bunch of episodes of the Contrafabulists. And
Yes.
Just before you joined the call here, the last thing I heard was it's one of the maybe the second last one. You were reading off some predictions that people had made for the future, and one of them was that magic mushrooms will be legalized. And then I hear Kin going, woohoo!
And actually, funnily enough, now they are legal in Denver. So,
oh wow,
yeah, which I'm not really sure. Yeah, the new prediction that the one I heard most recently that made me guffaw was Elon Musk, who's really great at coming up with these ludicrous futures scenarios, says that by next year that there are going to be 500,000 self-driving Tesla taxis on the road, which I think is so brilliant because there aren't 500,000 Teslas in existence, period.
And he says 500,000 taxis?
500,000 self-driving Tesla taxis. So I just love that. It's like, what you can just, I think in this sort of Silicon Valley craziness, you just get to say anything and then hope that the stock market responds positively and that you aren't sort of, I just don't know. I don't understand. I've been paying attention to the business side of tech for a long time now, and it still absolutely baffles me. It baffles me. The amount of money that these companies raise, the speed with which they burn through it, the idea that investors would look at these ideas that are pitched to them and think, oh, heck yeah, that I want in on that. Here's $50 million. That seems like a great idea. Yeah, it's weird. It's very weird.
We need that separate Audrey to pay attention to that. So what is a contrafabulist?
Well, fabulism is, of course, I think that fabulism is precisely what Elon Musk does, right? It's a lie.
Yeah.
He is a liar, but he's a storyteller, and he does create this sort of mythology around a lot of these tech entrepreneurs that they that they are very busy in crafting. That, I mean, it is a bit like The Emperor Wears No Clothes, that once you sort of poke a hole in it, you're like, I don't understand how anyone can take these people seriously. The things that, I mean, how many times does Mark Zuckerberg have to say, Facebook cares about your privacy, and then a week later they're like, oh, look, we found emails of Mark Zuckerberg saying, like, I'm going to sell all their data, LOL,
Yeah.
suckers. And then he's like, oh, I'm sorry, but Facebook really cares about your privacy,
Right.
I don't know how we keep, culturally, why we are so enamored with this particular set of people. And it's not just sort of, sort of, I guess, the youthful sort of Mark Zuckerbergs.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Elon Musk is roughly my age, which isn't particularly young. And, Bill Gates, similarly. I mean, Bill Gates, somehow folks seem to see, I think if you're in education, you're more likely to know that the damage that the Gates Foundation has done. But then it's interesting that people will say, oh, but they do great work in healthcare, and then people in healthcare are like,
maybe once. But the podcast it's great. I know you haven't made one in a while, and I don't know if you plan to more at some point, but it doesn't matter to me right now because I have like 60 more episodes to listen to. So
we had a good time doing it, but it's a bit like what I said with the paying close attention to the news day in and day out. I mean, I think it does make one. I mean, I think it helps to make one insightful, but there's so much dystopian work being done. I think both Kin and I had to really step away from it. I mean, it's really quite grim. I think that Facebook is a great example. Facebook and social media have done. I mean, I think one can say, like, oh, it's great. We get to, we can share things and we can learn from one another, and we have access to experts that would have been harder to reach before. But at the same time, I think that the damage that's been done to our democracy alone is significant, and so I think both he and I took a break from paying such close attention, and for me it was really great. It was so I was so happy to unsubscribe to all of the RSS feeds, and to not know. People would email me, did you know X, Y, or Z thing happened? And I was like, I did not. And I don't know why you told me. I was so happy. I don't care. I do care.
Yeah.
That's why it sucks, right? I care.
Do you currently have a don't swear sticky note on your monitor?
I am trying to not swear. Yes.
The swear barrier has been broken on this podcast before, so don't worry.
Good to know. Good to know.
So this is normally a 30-minute show, and we're pushing up against it already. So I don't want to take up more of your time, and I really appreciate it. I have tons more questions, so maybe someday you can come back on if you'd be up for it.
I would love that. And of course, despite my reticence about technology, once I have to move into marketing the book, I will be all over the Twitters and all over the podcasts to make sure that the book gets the right reception. I'm pretty excited about it. I feel like I said, I spent a lot of time in archives looking for slightly different angles on some of the stories that we've been told about instructional technology. And so I'm pretty excited for the book. Yeah,
I bet I am too. It's Teaching Machines. It's going to be out. You don't know for sure next year? Awesome.
Yeah, it'll be out next year.
Fabulous. Yeah. Looking forward to it so much. Thank you again so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
That was great. Have a wonderful